Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Who knows when you'll actually be seeing this. We're taping this on campus today, but we're not really sure when you will see it. So my greetings to you. Hopefully in the time that you are viewing this, maybe some of the restrictions are lifted and you will be able to involve yourself more in social and business dining. But for the purposes of this display, we will assume that things are back to a little bit more of a normal status and you can interact. But some of the things that I talked to you today about won't actually be physically possible, handshakes and all of that sort of thing. But again, it's an instructional opportunity for you, and again, the more information you have, the better off you'll be. Why do we care about etiquette? Obviously, particularly for our students, as they get closer to graduation, they're involved in the interview process, and interviews involve a lot of stages: the resume, the phone interview, and then hopefully a face-to-face interaction. From your resume, from talking to your professors, it's very easy for an interviewer and a potential employer to analyze you on paper. But what we want to do is find out whether the paper person is actually somebody that we'd like to have representing us in real life. And that's where etiquette skills come into play. On paper, everything is very objective. In etiquette terms, everything is much more subjective. So, again, we just need to be able to analyze people and make decisions based on their life skills. Etiquette in German means a label, so think of it as how people label you. And once that label's attached, it tends to stick and it tends to stay. If your reputation says unpleasant, difficult to work with, rude, that reputation goes a long way, and it's hard to get back from that position. So everything you do, every interaction you have, should be to say to people that, yes, I'd like to know this person better. I'd like to have this person involved in a work situation. I'd like to add this person to my circle of business associates. We're talking more about dining today, but think about etiquette every day. And again, some of this with the social distancing that we're experiencing at the moment is not necessarily going to be as valid as it would be, but again, it's still important to note. Typically, help other people, look out for other people, keep doors open to help people go through them, and elevators too, even though we're now restricted to maybe just one person in an elevator. But when we do get back to some sort of normality, just look out for other people. You never know who that person is, and the person that you hold the door for, the person that you help, could be the professor that's coming to talk in your class, could be somebody that has the opportunities for you to gain a better employment situation later. So, never discount any interaction with people. So, in terms of social and business dining, many times you're going to be invited to things, and that starts out with an invitation. Invitations are very important. Invitations are some part of a way of getting information to people. Typically, who's doing the inviting? Put a name, make it personal. What are you inviting me to? Lunch, tea, dinner? Tell me. And then give me a reason why we're having the event in the first place. If you received an invitation saying President Mitch Daniels cordially invites you to dinner, why? What have I done? What's going on? So help people through that process and give them a frame of reference as to why they're being included at all. Then, when do I need to be there? Day first, then time, and then where should I be? And again, give people as much information as possible. These days, we all have GPS or some other method of finding places, so give people all the information they need to be able to get there. Then on the bottom left, tell me how I'm supposed to respond. RSVP. 4 letters that are very, very important. Any of us who've ever planned an event do realize that RSVP is important because we don't know how many places to set, how much food to order, how many flower arrangements to organize. So make a decision once you've seen the invitation and tell somebody. Can I go yes? Can I go no? But tell somebody. Unfortunately, far too many people these days just assume that we know somehow telepathically that you are attending or not. So RSVP is very, very important. On the bottom right-hand side of an invitation, you may find there's more information about the event itself. And it may tell you where to park, it may tell you what to bring, and it may even tell you what to wear. And attire, again, is one of those things that people make decisions on. We've looked at your resume, we've built up a mental picture of you, and suddenly we are now faced with you walking through the door. And if you don't necessarily match that particular look, we're not really sure whether you're the right person. So again, dress for success. When you arrive, and when should you arrive? Many times there's a reception preceding a dinner. If it says 6 o'clock reception, 6:30 dinner, then don't be too early. A lot of people think that they're going to either run out of food or there's some reason to be there early, and you should really arrive between 6 and 6:30. So 6:10 to 6:20, you're perfectly okay. So don't be late, but don't be early. Both of those things I know are not easy to necessarily figure out, but try not to be one of the other. If you are early, just wait in the car, and then when you see other people arrive, go in with them. If you're running late, again, you've all got this device with you, so use this for good, for a change. Call and let your host know that you're running late, and they will appreciate the fact that they can then make a decision to start without you or to just wait for you to arrive. When you arrive, oftentimes, particularly a large event, there's going to be some sort of greeting line or receiving line. And if you see that, go through it as quickly as you can. Partly because you don't want to hold other people up, and really there is no gain to spending a lot of time talking to all of these people. So go through the line, nice to be here, good to see you again, thanks for including me, and in. Now, as I mentioned earlier, at the moment we are not advising the shaking of hands, but again, it's a good process to know a little bit about. So as you approach somebody, you should be the first person to reach out your hand and say, it's nice to meet you. And we shake hands with our right hand, and we have an open palm, and your hand and their hand should meet and interact. Typically, if you are standing, don't put your hands in your pockets, because again, it slows down your reaction to shake hands with people, and plus, if your hands are in your pockets, you tend to slouch. So stand up straight, hands ready to go, and off we go. Also, at the beginning of an event, it's quite likely that you will be offered something to drink. And if you are offered something to drink, quite often it comes with a beverage napkin. And you can use that to dry off your fingers, particularly if you're nervous, you get clammy. And clammy hands are not particularly pleasant things to shake. If you don't have that beverage napkin yet, you can always use your clothing as a surreptitious way of drying off your fingers. Another thing that we probably need to get used to is the fact that every time you go to an event, whether it's business or social, many, many times you're asked to wear a name tag. Now, obviously, those of us who work for Purdue have our pre-made name tags, and we put them on as part of our everyday attire, and we're just used to them. Pre-made name tags are great. However, once in a while, you may find you have to write your own. And write your own name tags are all very useful, but do make sure that someone can actually read it. If you put a name tag on and someone still has to ask your name, really, what was the point? Another bad habit that people get into is just putting one name. Anthony, which one? So again, make it useful for people, make it helpful, and put both names on, clearly written, and the name tag always goes on your right side. Why? Because when you shake hands, eye follows arm and comes to rest on the right side of the body. Typically don't hide it. Nobody's going to come along and say, hi, how are you? So again, put it on and be aware of it. Now, we do live in a very media-savvy age, and people are often using cameras, phones, all sorts of things to take pictures either of themselves or of other people. So generally, if somebody points a camera at you, take the name tag off, hide it, smile for the camera, You will appreciate the image later, and it doesn't say geek anymore. So name tags, useful, but not necessarily photogenic. As I mentioned at the beginning of an event, you may be offered a drink. There is absolutely no obligation to take that drink right away. If you feel that you are going to have to do a lot of mingling and introducing, you may want to unencumber yourself. And similarly, even if it's not a drink and you go to a career fair or you go to some sort of meeting, many of us will carry some sort of portfolio with us. And again, it's something else to have to deal with. So try and encumber yourself, carry as little baggage as possible. For women, try and find a purse that hangs on your shoulder so that both hands are free, and so you're not constantly wondering what to do with it, where to put it, how shall I deal with this? Because anything that you have that distracts you is going to count against you. So, we have our drink, and again, a drink is going to go into your left hand. Why? Because again, that still leaves your right hand free to shake hands. Beverage napkin underneath it, useful, as I say, for drying off your fingers if necessary, and also for putting it down later on. During a reception, typically, even if there are chairs provided, don't sit down. That way you aren't, again, making people feel awkward, and it's much harder to extract yourself from a sitting group than it is from a standing group. If you are mingling and mixing as you walk around, it's far easier to do that without sitting. Now, during a reception, we could offer you some food. Now, there are two methods of generally giving you food. And again, obviously, these things are subject to change at the moment because of the rule against buffets and being handed things by a server. Don't necessarily take this as likely activity right now, but again, hopefully when we get back to some sort of normality, we will be able to do this again. So if there's a buffet, go to the buffet, but generally take a plate, fill the plate, and move away. Because amazingly, the buffet is actually for everyone in the room, not just you. So don't use it as your own private dining space, take some food and move away. But having done that, you've probably now encumbered yourself with a plate and a glass. If you've got a plate in this hand and a glass in this hand and someone comes up to you and wants to shake hands, what are you going to do? Shake plates? So learn to be able to hold everything in one hand. So you've got your plate, your fork, your napkin, and your glass. You can take a drink. You can take something to eat. You can use the napkin. All of the time, still being able to, for the most part, shake hands or introduce yourself. Plus, it shows that you've practiced, and it looks like that you're willing to adapt to situations, whatever the situation. Many times, instead of having a buffet, we'll actually have people walking around serving you from a platter. In that case, you don't have a plate, but you need to still pretend as if you did. So from platter to an imaginary plate to mouth. So 1, 2, 3. So always that hesitation rather than Appetizers are not easy to eat. We in the hospitality industry love to watch you fail. So we will design food that's going to crumble, break, drip, dribble, and make it hard to eat. So as you look at the food on the platter, say to yourself, can I eat that neatly, cleanly, easily? If the case is no, simply say, I think I'll pass. Because once you've committed, you're stuck. So again, think ahead. Sometimes things are going to be on sticks, very easy to pick up. No greasy fingers, but however, you now own the stick. What to do with it? You can't put it back on the platter you just took it from. You can't chuck it on the floor. Don't tuck it behind your ear for later. Don't carry on a conversation with it rotating around the side of your mouth. If necessary, just tuck it into the napkin under your glass, put it in a pocket out of the way, or dispose of it in the proper place. But again, think ahead. What we're looking for is how prepared are you, how sophisticated you are to make it all work. Talked about a glass with a stem. Once in a while, you will have a cup with a flat base and a large enough plate. Perfectly okay to put that onto the side of the plate. Just don't overload the plate with chocolate sauce or ranch dressing so that you're making a mess again. So as I say, practice makes perfect. What you're looking for, or what we're looking for as we hire people, is people who can adapt to the situation. So we've had the reception, and now we are told that we're going into dinner. Typically, after the reception ends, give up this glass. Put it down on a table, give it to a server, put it out of the way. As you're told that dinner is ready, it means now, not in 10 minutes if you feel like it. So we need you to move because obviously things need to progress. If you have not finished the drink, it is perfectly okay to put down a half-finished drink. If you have finished the drink, the napkin goes beneath it, beside it, but never stuffed into the glass. And there is absolutely no need to chug the rest of your drink. It's perfectly okay to finish with a half-finished drink and then move. Why do we ask you to put it down? Is because when you get to the table, you can't help but make the place setting look untidy, so leave it behind. When you arrive at the table, many times you've been told where to sit. You may have been given a table number, table 7, table 9, table 12. When you arrive at the table, you may find we've gone one stage further and we actually have a place card with your name on it at a certain place. Why do we do that? Because we have a specific reason for you to sit there. So we need you to go exactly where we want you to go. And really one of the ways we can do that is to have a place card. When you arrive at the place that you've been assigned, stay standing. Rest your hands on the back of the chair if you must, but don't play with the chair because one day it's going to land you on the floor. If there are no place cards, then try and organize yourselves at the table to give everyone the best conversation. And that way you may have to sit next to somebody that you've never met before. And even though that feels uncomfortable initially, it's a very good way to establish a role, and it gets you into a position where you have to think of conversation and start a conversation with somebody who is unknown to you at this point. So it isn't a bad thing to find yourself placed next to somebody you've never met before. It is good practice. So learn to have conversation skills, learn small talk, basic subjects that might interest other people, and build from that, and it's a good thing to do. So while your table assembles, you stay standing, and then when you see that your table is mostly there, you give the signal, particularly if you're the host, that you should sit down. And the best way you can do that is to the person next to you, offer them the opportunity to sit. And helping people with chairs is a nice gesture. It means that you are aware of their needs, and it's again offering the opportunity to sit down. When you do help someone with their chair, pull the chair out. They step in, you slide the chair behind them. Don't just pull the chair out and walk away with them, they're going to land on the floor. Don't push them so far in that they can't move anymore. Now some chairs slide easily, some need a little bit more help, and so use your knee in the back of the chair to help that chair in. Now gentlemen, if you are the only man at the table and there are 8 ladies, you do not need to seat all 8. Typically, you'll seat the one on either side of you, and you may have a chance to seat one of the others, but you aren't going to be able to seat all of them. Typically, you would seat the oldest lady present first. The best way to find the oldest lady present is to make a good guess. Don't say, you look old, I'll seat you first, because it's not going to win you any plan. All right. When we sit down, particularly at a table with a tablecloth, do yourself a favor. Put your hand in front of your knee, push the tablecloth in. If your hand doesn't find a table leg, it's pretty likely that your knee is not going to either. We've all been to events where we've sat down and sorry, and then they stand up and they do it again. So again, do a little check as you sit down. Now when you sit down, bring yourself in close, sit up straight, and put both feet on the floor. You will look better, you will look alert, and you are minimizing the distance onto which you can spill. If you are the host and one of your guests arrives a little late, it's a nice gesture for you to actually rise, greet late arriving guest, and help them to their seat. Again, it's just a pleasant gesture, and it shows that you are aware of what's going on. First things you're going to do when you sit down is take the napkin off the table and put it onto your lap. Why do we do that? Because at some point fairly soon, a server is probably going to arrive with some plates. And if your napkin is in the way, so take that napkin and move it out of the way as soon as you can. A typical napkin is going to be about 18 inches square. Generally, it's going to be folded, and even though you unfold it, you'll put it onto your lap in a half-folded position, either across the middle here, across the middle here, with the open side towards you. That way, when you do need to use it to wipe something from your mouth, you can use the inside and the marks don't show. So it's going to come off the table and be placed onto your lap. You will see some people who go a little further and they take that napkin. Yes. Now this will cause you no mess, but it will also cause you no job. So no bibs, no tucking in, because basically you're saying to people now, I'm going to make a mess and this is how I deal with it. Another habit favored unfortunately by men is to tuck the napkin in. Guaranteed it's not going to slide off my lap. However, I will get up to go meet some people and I'll forget and it looks like I'm wearing a kilt. So napkin neatly laid on your lap, out of the way. For most people, when they sit down at a formal meal, the biggest concern is silverware. There's often quite a lot of it arrayed in front of you, and for many people, they may have managed to graduate college owning a fork, and there's a lot of finger food out there these days. So when you sit down at a formal place setting, there may be more silverware, etc., than you realize. If there's a menu at the table, look at the menu. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. It's less daunting. So a menu is there to help you. It's a guide. And generally, the silverware on the table adapts accordingly to the menu. You may find once in a while that you go to a meal that has more than 4 courses, but there won't be more than 4 courses worth of silverware on the table. As those meals progress, a server will bring you additional silverware as is necessary. When you first look at a place setting, typically from the outside to the inside is the order of courses. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. Again, if you're not sure what to do with the silverware, you can always look at somebody else. There's nothing wrong with copying. There's nothing wrong with following someone else's lead at the table. So, in this particular menu setting or place setting that I have in front of me, I have a spoon on the outside right. Now, this type of spoon is used for soup. Many of you will go to a restaurant in the US and you will find a teaspoon on the outside right. That is really for beverages later and has nothing to do with the food that's being offered. If a spoon like this appears, then we are going to be having soup. Now, generally a server will approach from the left and they will be serving you to the right. So they will come in and they will serve, and then when they clear, they will take away from this side. In order to make their life a little simpler, as you sense them coming in, you can lean slightly to make it easier for them to reach around you. As a server places something, do your best to acknowledge that. And the best way you can do that is by saying, thank you. Please and thank you are amazing words. They do a lot for us. They help us get through many, many situations. So use them as often as you possibly can. These days, it seems that many people keep them in a box and bring them out maybe on a Thursday if they're feeling generous. So use please, use thank you as often as you can. And anytime you're in a Starbucks line, just listen. People say, yeah, give me a triple latte, extra foam, 2 cups, and no sugar. And the magic word would be please. So please and thank you are helpful. If you acknowledge a server, you involve them, you are far more likely to get better service. If you ignore a server all the way through the meal, they can do a remarkable job of ignoring you when you do need something. So again, interact with the server and it will generally lead to a better situation for you. Now typically at your table, wait for everyone to be served. Once everyone has food in front of them, it's your job, particularly again if you're the host, to give everyone a signal that it's all right to start eating. How do you give that signal? Non-verbally, you pick up your spoon, and that says to everyone else at the table that they may do the same. Now, if you're not the host, wait for the host or hostess to pick up his or her spoon, and then you can follow suit. Many times these days, you're at a table that doesn't have a host, and so it's your job to initiate the fact that it's all right to start eating. Otherwise, you get this awkward situation of everyone sitting, looking at their food, and wondering what's going on. So if there's no host, be the one to start the situation and say, okay, let's go. Now, soup is not the easiest thing to eat. Soup is generally hot. Take the first spoonful of soup from the edge of the bowl. That's where it's going to be coolest. And always spoon soup away from you. As you spoon soup away, you can touch the bottom of the spoon on the side of the bowl. The drip stays here and not here. The key to eating soup nicely is to bring the soup from the bowl all the way up to you. And you drink out of the side of the spoon quietly. Good. Sounds great on the Campbell's ad, but not so much in real life. Now, if the soup, even taking it from the side of the bowl, is a little warm, put the spoon down, engage your fellow guests in a little conversation, and wait for the soup to cool naturally. Again, don't be seen to be blowing on your soup unless you're feeding somebody of 3 or under. Don't take a big spoonful from the middle of the soup without testing the temperature, because in it goes and so, again, be careful. When you get to the end of the soup, you can tilt the bowl away from you, pooling the remaining soup here, and take that last delicious mouthful. Even if it's the greatest soup you ever ate. Leave the pattern on the bowl. Now, soup is not easy to eat. Many times on a menu, we'll see soup listed. If soup is on the menu and it's served to you, you're going to have to deal with it. Now, if you go to a restaurant and we hand you a menu and you make the decision to choose soup, then you have done this to yourself. So be aware that sometimes we're serving it as a test, but if you choose it, you better be able to eat it well and look good in public doing it. So many of us opt, instead of a soup, to actually have a salad. The other wonderful thing about a salad is that oftentimes, particularly if we're limited on time, is that it can be preset on the table, so as soon as you sit down, ready to go. So salad is easier than soup, but it doesn't necessarily come without complications. Now, in my place setting, I have a small fork and a small knife for my salad. That way, if necessary, I can cut things into easier to manage pieces. I can make sure that they're well anchored onto the fork before I transfer them to my mouth, and it makes life simpler. Unfortunately, most places these days will not give you a salad knife. You are just given a salad fork. And that's all very well if the salad is in small, easy-to-eat pieces. Salad has graduated beyond chopped up stuff, and now it becomes a bouquet of wild field greens. Now, a bouquet of wild field greens does not necessarily wish to be tamed with a fork. And so no matter how good you are, fold, 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 dressing, 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 lift, unfold. Raspberry vinaigrette, regret, regret, regret. So again, be careful. Now, if there is something on your salad plate that does need to be cut into smaller pieces, it's very likely that you do have a knife ready on your place setting for your entree. It's your knife. If you need it for an earlier course, by all means use it. So if there's something on your salad plate that needs to be cut it into smaller pieces, but then you must leave that knife on the side of your salad plate. Anything that has been used cannot be placed back onto the table. And licking doesn't count. So it stays there, resting on the side of the plate. Now, when the server comes to take away your salad plate, they may say to you, would you please keep your knife, because they know that you're going to need it for your entree. If that's the case, then move it over to your bread plate, or as a last resort, you can rest it on the tines of the entree fork, but generally it's either going to be on your plate or over onto the left. Another thing about salad is, particularly if it's preset, when you first sit down, it is unlikely to have dressing on it. So somewhere on the table is quite likely to be 1, 2, or even 3 dishes or jugs of dressing. It doesn't matter who you are, where you fit into the hierarchy of the guest list. If you sit down and you see something in front of you that is meant for everyone at the table, then it is your job to initiate serving that as soon as possible. Use some logic. Here's the salad, there's the dressing. I bet those two things would go quite well together. Maybe everyone would like some. Maybe I should pass it around. Yes, please do, because we don't want to be saying, could you pass the dressing? Could we have the butter? Could you pass the rolls? Initiate serving these things as soon as possible. Pick up everything, so generally an underliner plate, the bowl of dressing, and then some device, a spoon or a ladle for serving it. Take all of that and offer it to the person seated to your right. If they say to you, please help yourself, by all means take some and then send it on its way around the table, generally so that everyone has access to everything. Now, as I said earlier, there may be more than one type of dressing. If the first dressing that comes to you is not to your liking, simply pass it along. Then the next one comes along, here's the ranch, good, we're in the Midwest, we're all safe. Okay, we can do that. So again, make sure that everyone has access to these things. Once in a while, you'll find that there's an empty space at your table because the RSVP list wasn't exact. And so you can stretch your arm across and the person receiving it from you can generally bridge one gap. However, once in a while, there may be more than one gap, so you may actually find yourself physically having to get up and pass things to people rather than trying to reach across and other things will get knocked over. So as I said, salad is generally easier than soup, but don't necessarily be unprepared for things like cherry tomatoes, which you try and spear it and ping, off it shoots, or a green pepper ring and you fold it and then... So again, think about how you're going to eat that salad and work well with it. We mentioned that salad dressings need to be passed, other things on the table that may need to be shared. Typically, there may be a roll basket. So again, if it's closest to you, initiate serving that as soon as possible. Pick it up, open the napkin, offer it. If it's offered back, take, but again, send it in that direction round to the right. Now your bread plate is always going to be on your left side. How to remember that? Make a B with this hand, and B for bread is always on the left. Your drinks are always going to be on your right. How to remember that? Make a D with this hand, so B for bread and D for drinks, and you'll always know which is yours. So the bread roll or bread or whatever shape of form it comes in is placed onto your bread plate. There may be on the table a separate dish of butter, which again needs to be passed to everyone. Take some. On it goes. In a perfect world, you would have some kind of device for spreading that bread. Now bread, no matter what shape or style it comes to you in, is always going to be broken with your fingers. So take that bread, tear off a small piece, take a little bit of butter, apply it to that piece only, eat that piece. Break it, butter it, eat it. Break it, butter it, eat it. It sounds laborious. It isn't going to win a time and motion study. However, it is going to look better. When you see people, it doesn't look good. If there are no butter knives, which in a world where there are no salad knives, butter knives are going to be also fairly rare, you may find also that this knife, ready for your entree later on, has helped you with your salad, but now suddenly it's also helping you with your bread. So it's quite multi-purpose. What this is also showing us, particularly if we are in the interview position and we are looking to add you to our staff in some role, what it shows me is that you're adaptable, you're flexible, you have the ability to deal with the things in front of you, and you can make the most of every situation. So don't necessarily assume that just because there wasn't a device for spreading butter that you can't use something else. So adaptability and flexibility are going to be keys to the whole game. Okay. So we said bread is on the left, drinks are on the right. Generally, when you first sit down, there will be a glass of water pre-poured for you. You can take a sip from that at any time. There's no need to wait for anyone else's signal. You can take a sip whenever you wish. The key, however, is to sip. Many of us are used to 64-ounce big gulp free refill mega cups. You may be served 10 ounces, 12 ounces of water. That may be all you're going to get. So don't gulp it down and then realize. So always save yourself a little safety net, just in case you get a dry throat at a certain point in the meal. You've got that way of helping yourself through that situation. So imagine this is all you're going to get and ration yourself through it. Many meals, particularly formal ones, each of the courses is accompanied by a separate wine. And wine and food do go well together. We have an excellent wine tasting class here at Purdue. It's a wonderful way to learn more about the interaction of food and wine. And so don't be surprised if when you sit down, there are wine glasses waiting for you. Typically, with wine glasses, a white wine glass is generally going to be smaller than a red wine glass. A white wine glass is going to be closer to you when you first sit down, because typically on a menu, white wines will go first and then we'll move to the reds. Now a server will come to you and they will say, would you care for some wine? You have ears, they have ears. So when they say, would you like wine? Your response would be, yes, please, no, thank you. Simple, clear, easy. If a server hears yes, please, they will pour. If a server hears no, thank you, they will avoid pouring you a glass, and then a good server will remove those wine glasses, indicating to other servers that you just wanted to stay with water. But you do need to say something, so that making sure that people know what you need is paramount. Now typically a white wine glass is going to be filled 1/2 to 2/3 full. A red wine glass 1/3 to 1/2. Generally, wait again for everyone to be served some wine. And again, if you're the host, it's a very good gesture at this point to make potentially a toast to your guests. Thank you all very much for joining us. We're looking forward to a great collaboration between our two organizations. Cheers. Toasting should be short, sweet, and to the point. We've all been to weddings, unfortunately, where the sister of the bride or the groomsman don't get the point, and they have long speeches, and you're thinking, are we ever going to get a drink? So keep it short and to the point. If you're toasting an entire room, then you probably should stand up so that people can see you and hear you. But generally, if you're just toasting a table, you can stay seated. So, as we move through our meal, we've now come to the point where we have an entree knife and fork in front of us. At that point, it is likely that the entree will be served. Now again, a served entree is probably going to be the way that we eat for quite some time, and that has put the large convention type meal on warning because we can't do buffets anymore. But it used to be that when you went to a buffet, the rule was that anything that you physically put onto your plate, you should be eating. If we have a served meal, we don't know how hungry you are, and so we will plate everyone's meal the same. And you may find there are 3 potatoes on your plate. You don't want to eat 3 potatoes, so you don't have to. But if you went to a buffet and you put 3 potatoes on your plate, then you should expect to eat them. So as I say, for the moment, it's unlikely that you will be going to a buffet situation just because of the fact that for the health reasons, we can't have shared utensils. But again, adaptability to those situations. So if you find yourself going to a meal and there is a buffet, it's likely that the food will be placed on a plate for you by servers behind the buffet instead of you helping yourselves. So again, we're going to have to adapt and work through that. So if we're in a situation where the food is served to you, again, the food arrives. Again, wait for everyone to be served. And then once everyone has been served, again, give the signal it's all right to start eating. Now, there are 2 main styles of holding silverware, and generally for your entree course, you will need 2. Firstly, there's the American style, and then there's the European style. So the American style, typically, we use the knife to cut, but then we place it back down, and we use the fork and assemble the forkful. Constantly putting down, picking up, it's called the zigzag method for a reason. So cut, place, assemble, eat. Each time you're picking it up. Now the European style, generally you'll pick up both pieces of silverware at the same time. You'll hold the fork in your left hand and invert it. Hold the food, cut the food, assemble the forkful and eat. Holding both pieces of silverware and keeping the fork in this way, upside down. It does take more practice because things don't necessarily want to balance on the outside of a fork, and so you would have to build a shelf with the meat, use the starch as glue and stick the vegetables on the back, but it does work quite well. The other great thing about the European style is it's efficient. Hold, cut, assemble, eat. There's no switching of hands, putting things down, so again, it tends to be a more succinct method of getting food to your mouth. Now, in between mouthfuls, if you're eating in the European style, your silverware is crossed like so, fork over the top of the knife, basically saying to a server who might be walking by that I'm just taking a break. If you're eating in the American style, the silverware is generally resting, knife to the right, fork to the left, and again, it's saying I'm just taking a break. Food is generally plated to be a good combination of flavors, and it's meant to be combined. So some meat, some potatoes, some meat, some vegetables. It's not an eat by numbers game, so don't eat all the meat, then all the potatoes, and then, ooh, green stuff, don't eat that. So again, combined forkfuls. Try everything. You may find on a menu that there's something you've never had before. That's wonderful. That's amazing. So broaden your horizons. Give yourselves an opportunity to try as many new things as possible. Because the more things you try, the more likely you are to like them. And then the next time you go to a restaurant, you can order it again because you know that you're already comfortable with that. So again, don't close off any opportunities to try new things. Now, if there's something you don't like, don't eat, can't eat, won't eat, when you respond to my very original invitation, when it says RSVP, please indicate any physical or dietary needs, that's when you say to me, by the way, I'm allergic to shellfish. By the way, I don't eat pork. That way, as I plan the menu, I can be sure, if I can, to make accommodations for your needs. Try not to be one of those very picky eaters that has so many lists of things that you can't eat, won't eat, don't eat, that it makes it very difficult for a host. And sometimes you'll find something on a plate that you don't eat. You can eat around it, it's all right. And if you're still hungry after you leave, we have restaurants with drive-through. You can get something to eat on your way home. So don't make your demands everyone else's problem. Now, we all like a different amount of seasoning on our food. It's hard to gauge where you fall in the sort of the list of people of lots of seasoning, very little seasoning. So you typically find that people under-season food, and that way they allow you the opportunity to add extra flavor if you wish. Now, if you first taste something and think it needs a little more salt, by all means, take some salt. There are a few companies who come even to Peru to interview. And if you, before you pick up your silverware to eat the entree, automatically reach for the salt and put salt on your food without having tasted it, that means the interview is actually over. So certain companies will use that as a test. And if you salt food without tasting it, it means you're likely to make decisions without basing it on fact. So always taste your food first. If you think it needs a little salt, by all means take some. Now, if somebody across the table asks for the salt, you always pass the salt and the pepper. Pretend they're married, they can't get divorced, they have to go everywhere together. In between mouthfuls, as I said, put the silverware down. Again, many times in a formal meal sitting, you're actually kind of nervous, and so putting the silverware down helps you pace yourself through the meal. Otherwise, there's a tendency to... Done. So, pace yourself through the meal. This will also give you time to involve yourself in conversation. And when you are putting your silverware down, you should also have an opportunity to talk. So as you take a mouthful, and somebody asks you a question, chew the mouthful as if you normally would, and then answer the question. Don't be one of those people who picks up food and then, oh, yeah, because we're thinking, is it? And then don't, I'm hearing a question with the food going around your mouth because nobody can understand what you're saying. Should you need to leave the table during the meal, for whatever reason? Generally, it's to go to some facilities in the building, but as you are leaving the table, make your excuses to the person on your right and left. Would you excuse me? Would you excuse me? You don't need to tell them where you're going or what you're planning to do when you get there. We have a pretty good idea. As you get up from the table, take the napkin off your lap, place it onto your chair. Off you go, return, pick up napkin, and resume your part in the conversation. Generally, try and limit the number of times you leave the table, just because it shows, again, preparedness for that situation. Now, obviously, there are times where you have to excuse yourself. There is no other opportunity. So, again, but make it as minimal as possible. If it's a job interview and there are competitors at the table for the same job, as soon as you leave the table, they are going to talk themselves up and talk you down. So you need to be present as long as possible. Another reason you might need to leave the table is the phone. Obviously, we've become very attached to these devices. They do rule our lives, but they shouldn't rule your meal. So they're out of sight, out of mind. They're on vibrate. And if at some point you realize that your phone is vibrating and it is a very important call, you would excuse yourself, take that call, and then return. Otherwise, let the phone vibrate, let it take a message, and deal with it afterwards. Don't disrupt the meal. Eat as much of your food as you can. Again, because it's plated, we don't know how hungry you are. So again, we may have put more food on the plate than you need. It is generally good advice to leave just a small amount on the plate. Particularly as you travel, you will find that in different countries, different rules apply. And there's a great book called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands, and it tells us a little bit more about how different cultures eat and different cultures treat the dining experience. And again, with anything, the more you know ahead of time, the better off you're going to be. And so if you are traveling to certain countries, particularly in Europe or South America or Asia, there are different rules applying to food, but generally speaking, it's good to leave just a small amount of food on your plate, which says to the host that you've enjoyed your meal very much and you've just reached a point where you can't enjoy anymore. In some cultures, if you eat everything on your plate, it's a signal that the host has not fed you correctly, and so they need to give you more food. So again, be careful. And again, little tips like that can go an enormous way to making you feel more comfortable and look more prepared as you do travel. To indicate you've finished, even if there's food left on your plate, put the silverware together, tines of the fork back in their upright position, and put the silverware at about 4 o'clock on the plate. This should be a universal symbol to any server that you have finished, even if there's food left and you no longer want to eat anymore. They can also, at that point, easily anchor that silverware with their thumb as they take it away, and you're safe. Unfortunately, far too many people just abandon the silverware as if they were abducted by aliens halfway through the meal and they just dropped everything. A server has no idea whether you've finished, and it's likely once they take away the plate that things are going to fall. So again, make your life simpler, make the server's job easier, and put the silverware together and indicate that it is ready to go. Try not to be the first person to finish. Try not to be the last person to finish. I know that at least 2 people at the table have to be one of those things. So what I'm saying is don't rush through the meal, but don't make everyone else wait. If you've done a lot of talking and you realize that your plate is still half full and everyone else's is empty, again, put your silverware together and forfeit the remaining part of your meal just to not keep people waiting. After the entree plates disappear, it's very likely that salad dressings, bread plates, butter dishes, bread baskets, all the things to do with the savory courses in the meal are taken away. Now, in a fine dining restaurant, you may find someone comes along with one of these, and they clear up any crumbs or little pieces of food that may have gone onto the table. Don't expect that this is going to happen. So if before your entree plate leaves you realize a pea or a carrot or a bean has hopped off the side of the plate, pick it up with your fingers, put it back onto the plate so when the plate goes, the evidence does too. Otherwise, there's a bean. So again, just be aware. Silverware for the dessert could be at the top of the place setting. When I used to be a butler at Blenheim Palace, we always used to set the silverware for the dessert inside the entree knife and fork so that outside to inside could continue and the dessert silverware was still there. In some restaurants, you won't get silverware for dessert until dessert is ordered or served, in which case the server will then place the silverware. Or in certain situations, the dessert will arrive with the silverware in place. So there's a variety of ways of getting this final course to you. Typically with dessert, if there are 2 pieces of silverware, it's generally in your best interest to use them. You can hold with the fork, cut with the side of the spoon, which is remarkably sharp when necessary. Because if you are trying to eat a piece of pie or cheesecake and you're pushing, pshing. So hold and cut. Also, that last raspberry or blueberry that you're trying to get onto that fork and you're chasing it around the plate and you think nobody's looking, I'll hook it on with my finger. We were looking. So again, 2 pieces ideally. We talked about wines a little earlier, white wine, red wine. If there is a small glass at the place setting as well, it is quite likely to be for a dessert wine that accompanies the dessert course. Dessert wine glasses are generally very small because the wine is very sweet and you don't need a lot of it. But again, if the dessert wine glass is there, expect that a dessert wine is going to be offered. It's not the easiest target for a server to hit, so you may find that even though a dessert wine is listed on the menu, it's actually brought out to you, pre-poured, and served to you. At this point in the meal, we may offer you tea or coffee. And again, if a coffee cup is preset at the table, a server will appear and say, "Would you like coffee?" Again, yes please, no thank you, works well. Don't, because again, it's implying that you don't want any coffee, but it's not done in a particularly polite way. If you have taken tea or coffee and you require something in it, you may find that that cream and sugar is close to you, in which case you can take, help yourself, and then make sure that other people have access. You may not take anything in your tea or coffee. The cream and sugar is still next to you. If other people take tea or coffee, again, your job is to make sure that they have access to the things they might need as soon as possible without having to ask for it. Any of you who use any of the packets, tear the packet, pour the contents into your cup, and then place the used packet on the saucer. Don't litter the table and don't make the place look untidy. When you're stirring, stir quietly. Nobody likes to hear that sort of noise. So again, be as surreptitious as possible. During the meal, make good conversation, keep up with the topics, and also, again, as you listen to people, store topics for later so that you are, again, able to reintroduce topics of conversation as necessary. As the meal does come to a conclusion, you may find that you are leaving, but other people are staying. At that situation, make your excuses. I do have to be back at the office, but please do stay and enjoy your coffee. Again, get up from the table. Again, take the napkin off your lap. And again, place that napkin onto your chair. If we're all leaving the table at the same time, then your napkin can be placed onto the table. Put the napkin onto the table, not onto the plate. Servers don't like having to extract napkins out of chocolate sauce. And place the napkin next to your plate. Even if food service was your major and you've done some serving work in your lifetime, there is no need to display that fact and put the napkin back the way you found it. Similarly, don't give people the impression you've had a bad meal and get up from the table and just discard the napkin. So just place it nicely next to your plate. Now, at the end of a meal, it's likely, particularly in a restaurant situation, that a check will appear. Now, when a check appears, if it's placed on the table and you are the person who is hosting, you immediately reach for that check and you bring it into your space. Even if you don't pay it immediately, you have said, "I am taking care of this." If the check remains between the two of you, at some point you need to make the decision as to whether you're paying or whether you're going to actually split the check. And splitting a check is something that's fairly unique to business meals. And do that splitting in a way that is very succinct and is very simple. So if the check is $50 and there are two of you, it's $25 each plus tip, no matter what you ate, no matter what the other person ate. Because when you've had a good meal, nothing ruins it more quickly than seeing people argue about the price of a glass of wine or an extra dessert or who had the more expensive entree. Because all you're going to remember as you leave that restaurant is that last conversation, which happened to be about money. So deal with the check as quickly as possible in as simple a way as possible. If you expect to pay, but you're worried that someone else may take the check ahead of you, before you even sit down, talk to the server and say, please make sure that I get the check. If you have a good reputation with that particular restaurant and you dine there on a regular basis, set up a system of accounting so that you don't even get the check. At the end of the meal, everything's taken care of and they can just bill you afterwards. Your guests are going to be much more impressed with that situation because they think, wow, we have this great meal and we don't even need to pay. How very nice. So again, all of those details make for a better experience for everyone. If somebody else takes care of the check, thank them very much. It's very kind of you. Please, and next time we have a meal, please make sure that I take care of you. So be thankful at that point. At the end of a meal also, particularly if it's a business interaction, it's quite likely people will ask you for a business card. Have your business cards ready. And when you're asked for a business card, present one. Don't just assume that everyone wants one and start dealing them out like we're going to play euchre for the evening. So again, present when necessary. If you do receive a business card in exchange, always look at it. Even if you're not, pretend as if you are reading it. Thanks. And then put it away. Not, haha, I got 10 today, off we go. So again, make sure that you treat the business card with as much respect as you treat the person who's giving it to you. Now, I always carry what I call a pocket briefcase, something to write on, something to write with. That way, if somebody does give you some useful information, you can jot it down quite quickly and easily, and it's all ready to go. And it's very likely that somebody at the table will need a pen. And if you hand them this, they'll think that you just invented the wheel. It's like, wow, how did you do that? So again, all of those little things make for a more professional approach. The other nice thing about these pocket briefcases, you can slide a credit card, you can slide some cash, so that it's all ready to go in a nice, slim, easily pocketed device. So the meal ends, you've left the table, you've had a good experience, your napkin is back on the table, you make your exit. When you get back to your desk, whether that be at home or at the office, reach into your drawer, find some stationery, and decide to write a thank you note. Now, what to put on the stationery? You can have a picture of your house, you can have a nice generic art picture, corporate logo, all work well. What you're doing is, again, just reinforcing the good relationship you had. A thank you note does not have to be very long. Dear George, thank you so much for lunch. It was wonderful catching up, and I really look forward to our new business venture together. Sincerely, Anthony. Boom, done. 2.5 minutes, ready to go. When it arrives, it feels good. People like to have tactile interaction. So an email thank you works well, but a handwritten thank you note is going to be even better. When you do go out to buy stationery, as I say, find some kind of generic art pictures if possible. Try not to buy cards with the word thank you on the outside. Because if you say thank you on the outside, what are you going to put inside? So thank you is pretty easy. And if you do need help, go to the store, take the card off the shelf, read what it says inside, put it back on the shelf and go home and write that in your own words. It's going to mean a lot more to the person who receives it. When should you receive a thank you note? Generally 24 to 48 hours after the event. So don't think, oh, I should have sent a thank you note. Get back to your desk, send it as soon as possible. All of that I talked about is not rocket science. It's general good etiquette for a meal. So practice makes perfect. I know, particularly in the circumstances we find ourselves at the moment, the opportunities to practice this are not as widespread as they were. But anytime you get the opportunity to interact with other people over food, observe. See how other people work well with their food, see how other people interact, and make the simplest of business interactions still a very profitable one for both parties. So, as I say, practice makes perfect. Enjoy every opportunity, learn from that opportunity, and enjoy. And even though it isn't rocket science, it does help rocket scientists get better jobs. So people are observing you all the time. Make sure that you make the good impression and make the right impression every time. And with that, thank you all very much for your attention. I will attach to this a method of getting in touch with me, so there's an email address if you have questions. But from that, thank you all very much for your time.